Tonight on Unsolved Mysteries.
Thieves target $3 million in an armored car in Las Vegas. They steal the vehicle, then disguise themselves as they make their getaway by jet. Many called it the perfect crime. Perhaps you can help bring the thieves to justice. When a healthy, well-liked 41-year-old man was found dead in his bed of apparent natural causes, few suspicions were raised, until the autopsy revealed he'd been murdered. And now a small circle of Hood River, Oregon residents are finding themselves under suspicion. An innocent night out suddenly becomes a battle for survival for a young Indiana woman. What makes this story unique is that she has chosen to fight back, and that the identity of one man who is accused of terrorizing her is known. Authorities now need your help to catch him before he strikes again. This single mom had everything to live for, a beautiful daughter and a new man in her life. Then she mysteriously vanished. Police later found her SUV, but why was there no trace of Niqui McCown anywhere? With every mystery, a single critical clue may be the key to a solution. Perhaps you hold that key. Join us for Unsolved Mysteries. Las Vegas, where the lure of the quick score entices gamblers to risk it all with a pull of a handle or the turn of a card. For those daring enough to take a much greater gamble, however, the biggest payoff is not in the casinos. It is in the armored vans that supply the casinos with millions of dollars in cash. Friday, October 1st, 1993 begins like every other day for 21-year-old Heather Tallchief.
Radio check, Route 3, arriving at drop-off number 1.
She and her two partners are responsible for making the rounds of several casinos, replenishing their automatic teller machines with cash.
How much you taking in? 125, 150. Better put in a little more. Just gotta fill them for the weekend.
Heather would drive to the back portion of the casino and drop us off. I would be carrying the money, and my partner and I would enter the casino.
The final ATM the guards will service is near the casino's side entrance. Standard procedure calls for Heather to move the van there to pick up her partners when their job inside is finished.
When my partner and I exited the casino, we did not see the van anywhere. We assumed that maybe she got lost, that she was stuck in traffic, or that maybe she might have been in an accident. We didn't know. So I, in joking, suggested that she might have taken the vehicle.
A surveillance camera recorded the moment when she was last seen. The tape reveals no sign that she had been hijacked or met with any sort of foul play. The Las Vegas police can find no trace of Heather or the van. Ultimately, they conclude that she has fled by design with $3 million in cash. Heather Tallchief appears to have pulled off what many consider to be the perfect crime. She not only got away with the money, but managed to elude capture for 8 years. According to the F.B.I., it is one of the largest armored car robberies in which the perpetrator has not been brought to justice. Perhaps you can help authorities finally track Heather down. No one suspected that Heather Tallchief had the inclination or the audacity to commit such a brazen crime. She was a nurse from Buffalo, New York, of Seneca Indian descent, building a promising career in medicine. Then, inexplicably, she surfaced in Las Vegas seeking a new job.
Heather Tallchief applied for the job with the armored car company approximately 2 months before the robbery, and the investigation has led us to believe that this entire event, from the moment of applying for the job to the robbery, was all planned in advance for the sole purpose of committing this crime.
Shortly after the robbery, investigators searched Tallchief's apartment. They discovered fingerprints that provided an important clue. Heather, it seemed, had not acted alone. The prints were identified as those of Roberto Solis, a convicted murderer who had been released from prison 6 years earlier. In 1969, he had shot and killed an armored car guard during an unsuccessful robbery. Intelligent and articulate, Solis used his time in prison wisely. Over 17 years, he authored 5 books. His achievement was heralded by professional writers as proof of his rehabilitation.
That's how he got an early release from the state penitentiary. A lot of well-known poets would write in his behalf, and he was allowed to be released early.
Tallchief and Solis met in San Francisco, where they began a relationship and subsequently planned this crime.
Once we get you into an armored car company, there'll be a matter of time before they'll give you a big cash run.
How do you know they'll hire me?
I know what to put down in the application. Yeah, take a look at this.
48-year-old Solis and 21-year-old Heather were an unlikely romantic couple and adept partners in crime. Investigators learned that they designed their scheme with meticulous care. They recognized that the most difficult challenge in a multi-million-dollar robbery is often not the theft itself, but the getaway.
It'll work, trust me.
2 hours after Heather sped the armored van from the casino, an unusual couple arrived at Las Vegas's Hughes Airport. They had chartered a private jet to Denver, Colorado.
They were very well disguised. Solis looked like an older gentleman, a doctor. The Tallchief like a sickly, invalid older lady. There's only 3 small suitcases were taken aboard the craft when they traveled from Las Vegas to Colorado. If you had $1 million at $3 million, it would take approximately 8 to 10 suitcases to transport that much money. We surmise that they must have shipped the money on ahead.
3 days later, the FBI traced Heather and Solis to Denver. But by then it was too late. Denver, they believed, had been only a brief stopover for the fugitives before they continued on to their final destination. But where was it? Investigators found an address that indicated they may have fled to Florida. But that address turned out to be merely a postal drop containing 2 forged passports. Both were for entry into the South American nation of Suriname. But the FBI questioned whether this had truly been Tallchief's and Solis's destination. It was possible that they had intended for the documents to be found as part of an elaborate effort to mislead their pursuers. 13 days after the robbery, investigators discovered the armored van in a commercial rental site in Las Vegas. Inside the building they rented were packing materials. This confirmed the FBI's suspicions that the $3 million had been shipped to some unknown destination. They learned that Heather and Solis had set up a phony business here so that they could abandon the van in plain view without attracting suspicion.
He told everybody he's starting a new business.
Solis opened this business under the guise of retrofitting vehicles to be used as armored car vehicles. In that manner, it didn't draw any attention to the other people in the area when a real armored vehicle was brought into the facility.
The ploy was one of many carefully crafted details to a seemingly flawless crime.
I think that it was well thought out, well conceived, and well executed, but crime doesn't pay, and I don't think it's a perfect crime. I think that we'll still get them. They only have to make a mistake one time, and we've got them.
So what else do you want to know about me?
Although Hood River, Oregon residents Eric Tamiyasu and Diana Anderson had known each other for years, this was their first date.
It was just kind of, you know, checking each other out and seeing if maybe this is someone that I would like to spend more time with, and I think it was the same for both of us.
What do you do for fun?
Golf.
Eric was an attentive host and the date seemed to be going well. However, beginning at 11 p.m., the couple was harassed by mysterious tapping noises outside.
What was that?
And the sound of someone apparently at the front door.
You like it?
The second time the doorbell rang, footsteps could be heard running away, but there was no sign of anyone.
It was not funny at that time of night when I have to get in my car and drive home by myself.
That was the last time Diana Anderson saw Eric Tamiyasu. Eric's home was located in a remote area outside of town, next to the fruit orchard business he owned and operated. A week after Eric's date with Diana, Don Dixon, a friend and business consultant, drove out to Eric's house to check on him.
Hey, Eric! Eric, it's Don. You home?
According to Dixon, for several days he had fielded phone calls from other friends of Eric's who had not been able to reach him. Dixon used the key Eric had given him to enter the home through a back door.
Eric, you home? It's Don.
He was greeted by an overpowering smell.
It was an odor that I'd never smelled before.
Eric?
My initial hope was that this was the garbage that I had seen left out.
Getting no response, Dixon headed upstairs to the master bedroom.
Eric!
There was no question in my mind that he was dead. So I said a prayer. I went downstairs, and I called 911 and asked for assistance.
Investigators from the Hood River County Sheriff's Department quickly arrived on the scene.
When I first walked in, it appeared to me that we were dealing with an unattended death, that something had happened, whether it was a medical problem or, a heart attack, those kind of things. There was no sign of trauma that we could see right off, nothing that could indicate that there was any kind of foul play.
At the time of his death, Eric Tamiyasu didn't seem to have an enemy in the world. But an autopsy would reveal that he did not die of natural causes. In fact, he was killed by 3 gunshots to the head. Incredibly, the advanced state of decomposition of the body had disguised the true nature of his death. Who killed Eric Tamiyasu? At this time, the investigation is focused on 3 potential suspects, all of whom have agreed to be interviewed. One of them happens to be the sheriff overseeing the murder investigation. As Eric Tamiyasu's body was being removed from his house on the day it was discovered, Sheriff Joe Wampler approached Eric's friend Don Dixon with what Don considered a strange request.
Does Eric have a burn pile around here?
And he said, we've looked for a gun, we've looked for bullet holes, we've looked for shells, and to spare the family grief and discomfort, we're going to bring the bedding out, and we want you to burn it.
Piece of earth over there, I could burn it there.
And I said, if it would help the family, I would be happy to do what I can to assist.
At sunrise the following morning, Don Dixon set fire to the soil bedding that had been removed from Eric's room. When he was done, there was nothing left behind but a metal frame and a pile of ashes. A day later, during Eric Tamiyasu's autopsy, Hood River County investigators were stunned to learn 3 small-caliber bullets were lodged in his head. Investigators now had a homicide on their hands and theories began to emerge. Because of Sheriff Joe Wampler's decision to burn the bed, potentially valuable clues had been destroyed.
Based on the lack of evidence that this was going to turn into a criminal case, it was my decision to burn the bed. It was my decision at that time because the family, they might just actually appreciate not having to go through the trauma of viewing the horrid things that were left behind.
But could the sheriff have had a more sinister motive for destroying potential evidence? A possible answer may have come up in a conversation Don Dixon said he had with Eric regarding a new romantic relationship.
There's this Polynesian woman I've been seeing a little bit.
This Polynesian woman described as older than he was, and the rumor mill has that the sheriff's wife is Polynesian and older than Eric. But that could be purely coincidental.
I've heard a rumor that my wife was having an affair with Mr. Tamiyasu. And out of retaliation for that, then I went up there and did these things. Even went to the trouble of destroying the evidence, burning the bed and all that stuff. All I can say is they're looking in the wrong direction.
If Sheriff Wampler had nothing to do with the murder, who did? Eric Smith, Eric Tamiyasu's lifelong friend, is considered potential suspect number 2.
Okay, what have we here? There's 2 of us.
Don Dixon, who occupied an office in the same building, says he overheard a heated argument Eric Smith had with the victim just days before the murder.
He and Eric Smith had been in business together, and Eric Tamiyasu felt that Eric was pocketing money.
Well, what's all these expenditures, you know? It's supposed to go into the business, and here you're going out blowing it like there's no...
And that he owed him between $50,000 and $60,000, and he needed to collect it because the orchard business was really on a downslide, and he needed the money to finish the crop year.
Hey, Eric, is everything okay?
According to Dixon, after Tamiyasu confronted Smith about the money, Eric Tamiyasu was clearly upset.
I asked him if he was okay, if everything was all right. He said, "That son of a bitch," and got into his car, and that's the last words that I heard from Eric Tamiyasu.
I can tell you flat out for a fact, Eric and I did not have an argument. Eric didn't owe me money, I didn't owe him money. Don lives in a fantasy world.
But it was no fantasy that Eric Tamiyasu and Eric Smith did at one time have a side business together selling used cars. However, police believe that the amount invested was far less than Don Dixon claimed.
When I checked into the business dealings with Eric Smith and Eric Tamiyasu, we found out they both invested the same amount of money, which was probably $15,000 to start this business, not $50,000 or $60,000. And it went downhill, and then they had to go out of business.
If Eric Smith was not involved in Eric Tamiyasu's death, who else might have been? Potential suspect number 3, the man who discovered the body, Don Dixon. As questions began to mount, some began to wonder whether Dixon, Tamiyasu's orchard consultant, was as close to him as he claimed to be.
What Eric told me was that Don is somebody he bought spray from. Period. Talk to any one of Eric's friends, most of them don't even know who Don is.
It was Don Dixon who notified Eric's sister, Ramona Tamiyasu, of her brother's death just minutes after he discovered the body.
Well, I came out to his house, I found Eric, and he's dead.
She recalled that what he said next struck her as very strange.
He said it didn't look like there was any foul play, and it also appeared that there weren't any exit wounds. And I said, what are exit wounds? What are you talking about?
Exit wounds, like from a bullet.
I said, what? Why would there be gunshot wounds?
Well, I clearly looked closely at the body to try and see if he had shot himself. I mean, because that was one of my first reactions, was it was suicide. He had been very depressed. And I had looked closely because of that. I mean, I honestly believe that a logical reason Eric was dead in bed was suicide.
But Eric Tamiyasu had been shot 3 times. His death was clearly not a case of suicide. Investigators theorized that the killer knew not only the remote location of the Tamiyasu home, but also its layout. The murder weapon, believed to be a small caliber handgun, was not found. Could one of these men have murdered Eric Tamiyasu, or could someone else have pulled the trigger? In one final twist to this classic whodunit, Diana Anderson says that during her date with Eric Tamiyasu, they went outside to look for the source of the strange noises and found a single unexplained shoe print. Could that have been the shoe print of Eric Tamiyasu's killer? Investigators will never know. Heavy rains in the days following their date washed away any potential evidence left that night.
I don't know if the events on Saturday night had anything to do with Eric's murder, or if it was just coincidence. I think it's a possibility, but I don't know.
For now, many unanswered questions still hang over the town of Hood River. Did the sheriff deliberately destroy evidence in the case?
I did not have anything to do with the death of Eric Tamiyasu, no.
Could Eric Smith have wanted Eric Tamiyasu dead?
Eric was my best friend. I mean, he was the best man at my wedding. He was like my brother.
Did Don Dixon tell the truth about his connection to the murder?
I have no way of knowing who was involved with Eric Tamiyasu's death. The only ones that I know that didn't do it are my wife and myself. Other than that, everybody else in my mind is suspect.
All the principals in this case have taken and passed polygraph tests arranged by the Hood River County Sheriff's Department. Except Don Dixon. Dixon recently took an independently administered polygraph. The results were deemed inconclusive by the Sheriff's Department. A local hangout popular with college students in Mishawaka, Indiana.
Well, you, my friend, will be buying the drinks. So what do you want?
A young woman and a friend have come here for a night out.
Yeah?
Yeah.
At her request, we've changed her name. We will call her Lori.
We did our usual, setting up the pool table, all making little jokes where I'll bet you that I'll beat you, 2 best out of 3.
I am on a roll tonight. Okay.
And whoever wins that would get a free drink.
Oh, well.
Though Lori wasn't aware of it, she had caught the attention of some other men in the bar.
Yes.
There you go.
Lori briefly left her friend and went to the bar to order her victory drink.
Can I get a beer, please? Thanks.
She now noticed that the men at the bar seemed fixated on her. Uncomfortable, she walked away. As she moved through the bar, Lori paused near an exit. She had no inkling of what was about to happen. What had begun as a simple evening of friendly billiards would soon become a night of terror for Lori. Over the next few hours, she would experience every woman's worst nightmare. Lori has bravely chosen to tell her traumatic story to help police. Investigators need your help to track down the individuals responsible for the suffering that Lori ultimately endured and survived. Without warning, a group of men surrounded Lori. And they abducted her from the bar.
I was taken to a car that was no more than 6 feet from that final door. And it was 2 men pushing me into this car. I screamed, but that scream was very short and fleeting because so quick they had me in that car. In quicker than I could snap my finger, we were backing up.
A terrified Lori was restrained by the man in the back seat. After about 20 minutes, the 2 kidnappers who conversed in Spanish got into an argument. Then the driver suddenly pulled the car over and left.
Get out of here, Dad!
I believe that the man in the front had decided not to carry on from this point.
The remaining man pulled Lori into the front seat and drove her to a nearby apartment. As her abductor dragged her through the door, Lori desperately sought anything she could use as a weapon. But Lori's attempt to fight back only served to further enrage her assailant.
He dragged me into a bedroom, and that is where he was able to overpower me, and he violently raped me there. After the assault, I got this fire inside of me. No more was all I could hear in my brain. So I just took that power and I gave him a kick. I brought my knees up and kicked him off of me. And it gave me enough time to get up off of that nasty mattress and dirt and filth, and I ran through into the living room. I just thought, get out, to the door.
Hoping to hamper her attacker's pursuit, Lori threw furniture in his path. But he easily ran over it.
And he threw me up against this wall by my neck. I could hear the bones in there crunching, and I could feel it. The pain was overwhelming, and I couldn't breathe, and the lights were going dark. I knew he's killing me. And I said, no, I have more to life than this. And I brought that knee up, and as hard as I could, bang, I took that foot into his gut. And it threw him back, made him fall to his butt. And I just booked it for everything I had. I was a track star that day. I ran for that back kitchen door, and by the grace of God, I was able to get the door out, ran out that door. And I can hear him coming, and he's screaming, and it's getting louder, meaning he is right on my tail. And I ran, and I screamed. And I could hear him coming through that gate. There was a dumpster at the end of this alley, and I ran real quick around behind that dumpster, and I squatted. And I sat there and I listened, and I could hear the gravel coming. I know he was out there looking for me. So I tried to just hold my breath, and you're so hysterical. That was the hardest thing, to control my breathing, because I didn't want him to hear me.
Petrified with fear, Lori waited 20 minutes before she fled the safety of her hiding place and located a payphone.
How long ago did this happen? 10 minutes ago. He grabbed me and pulled me out of there. I kicked and I screamed. Nobody came. Ma'am? They know where you are now. They're going to be sending help now.
Police responded to the scene immediately.
Oh, what a relief that was. And I could just feel my body just drained of exhaustion from the fear.
I ran this way.
Lori next retraced her escape route to lead authorities back to the scene of her brutal assault.
She was going through the most traumatic time in her life, but yet she was able to give us the location of the residence where it took place. She was able to give us a description of her attacker.
Within a few hours of Lori's escape, police secured a search warrant and entered the property where the attack occurred. Everything was as she said it would be.
There were key pieces of her clothing that were found in this bedroom.
She said she was wearing beige pants.
It was important that she remembered where this attack took place because that's how we were able then to identify the suspect, because we could link the suspect to the residence. We were then able to identify a person named Rufino Castaneda as a potential suspect in this case. He had a history of choking and assaulting at least one other woman.
Tell me if you recognize any of these people.
Okay.
Okay?
The day after the abduction, Detective Whitfield included Castaneda's prior booking photo in a lineup he showed to Lori.
That's him.
Now that Rufino Castaneda was positively identified, tracking him down became a priority. But Castaneda had apparently vanished the day after Lori's kidnapping. Investigators learned he abruptly resigned from his job following a visit by two unknown individuals. Castaneda has not been seen since. Investigators suspect Castaneda's partner in the abduction was a relative. However, there is not currently sufficient evidence to make an arrest. Lori continues to be haunted by the horrifying attack.
You might be out in public and there might be a smell of something that takes you right back to it. And it's just like you're right back there living it. I remember every single thing. I don't remember bits and pieces. I remember everything, right down to the smell of that man, to the sweat that was on my body, to all of that. This man needs to get off the streets before he does this again, because I don't believe the next woman will make it. And nor do I believe that I was the first.
July 22, 2001. It was a sweltering day in Richmond, Indiana. But when 20-year-old Niqui McCown walked into her mother's house, it wasn't only the weather that had her hot under the collar.
These two guys at the laundromat would not leave me alone.
Well, you're a very beautiful girl. I can understand that.
No, these guys are creepy.
She just was really upset.
I don't even want to go back down and get my laundry.
And I laughed at first, you know, because she's such a pretty girl. I just thought that some man was making a play, you know.
I'm gonna go, Mom.
I said, Niqui, just calm down, because she really was really upset.
Authorities believe Niqui McCown did return to the laundromat a short time later, but no one knows for sure. Niqui mysteriously disappeared that muggy summer day. She has not been seen or heard from since. Police suspected foul play. However, two elements essential to solving most homicides were missing. There was no body and no apparent motive. Niqui was friendly, had no known enemies, and looked forward with great anticipation to her upcoming wedding. That never happened, leaving detectives with a complex puzzle and pieces that simply didn't fit.
So you guys are gonna get fitted for your tuxedos today?
Yeah, we're gonna go by there later.
Sunday, July 22nd began routinely enough. After attending church, Niqui set off to do the laundry, while her fiancé, Bobby Webster, met the best man in his wedding at a local tuxedo shop. Bobby and Niqui planned to get together later that afternoon. The big event was just 3 weeks off, and the bride-to-be wanted the special day to be extra special. Niqui had a 9-year-old daughter from a prior relationship, and even her ex-boyfriend seemed happy for her.
She spent so much money, put so much into this wedding. She wanted it to be the most perfect wedding. She wanted her face to be perfect, her hair to be perfect, her body to be perfect. She wanted everything to be perfect.
Niqui had always been a perfectionist, despite being the youngest and most precocious of 10 kids in a close-knit family.
She was the daredevil. She would try anything. She loved sports. She's very academically inclined, too. I mean, she made the honor roll all the time. She made the dean's list here recently over in college.
Hey, you mind if I just jump in that, use that machine right there real quick?
No, it's fine.
That's cool? No one's using it?
So what happened to Niqui that summer day in 2001?
Oh, you know what? I'm just grab this real quick.
Excuse me.
I'm just gonna borrow this real quick. That's
Did
all.
she return to the laundromat where she was confronted by two strangers up to no good?
I can't believe that, you just here all by yourself and stuff. Wait, come here. What?
And why did those close to Niqui find no trace of her anywhere?
Hello, Barbara? This is Bobby. Have you seen Niqui?
The day after Niqui's disappearance, Monday, July 23rd, her fiancé contacted the Richmond Police Department.
Yeah, I tried them, but nothing.
Filling all that information, that missing persons report, was very difficult. It was because a situation like this you just see happening on like a TV movie or something. You never really think in your wildest imagination you'd be in that situation until it really happens, and it's really confusing, really.
Over the next week, detectives looked into the alleged incident at the laundromat and the possibility that Niqui had been abducted. They also had questions for her fiancé, Bobby Webster. According to police, Bobby had begun acting very strangely in the days immediately following Niqui's disappearance. Instead of postponing the wedding, he canceled it entirely, demanding a full refund from the reception hall.
I'm sorry about that. And the ring
Bobby then tried to return his wedding band, also for cash.
Your policy clearly states that if I bring back the ring and the ring is not damaged, sir, please.
But the manager refused. Niqui had paid for the ring, and her name was on the receipt. Allegedly, the heated argument nearly turned violent, and Bobby had to be escorted from the store.
I'm gonna have to ask you to leave.
Bobby said he needed the money to help find Niqui, to pay for flyers and a cell phone.
You're sorry.
I was to the point where it's like, it doesn't matter right now. This wedding doesn't matter. Niqui's well-being is what matters right now.
Detectives weren't convinced and pressed Bobby to take a polygraph test. He refused at first, but later said yes.
One of the questions that was asked to Mr. Webster was, did you have anything to do with the disappearance of Niqui McCown? And he says no, and according to the operator, the needle about jumps off the chart. So not only did he fail it, he failed it miserably.
Bobby denies that accusation. He claims neither he nor his lawyer ever saw the results.
I just said, look, you ain't got to give it to me, just send it to my lawyer. But they don't do stuff like that around here. That's what they told me.
More than 3 months passed, still no sign of Niqui McCown. Then on November 5th, 2001, detectives caught a break. Niqui's SUV was found parked at a sprawling apartment complex in Dayton, Ohio, 45 minutes east of her home in Indiana. It had apparently been abandoned for some time. Police found a punched-out door lock, an ignition that had been tampered with, and a missing stereo system.
We kept getting told by the police, we gotta locate this truck. It's the big piece of the puzzle. And when they located it, it was a little relief that now they can find Niqui.
Unfortunately, locating the SUV raised more questions than it answered. Police found no fingerprints or other promising leads that might help them find Niqui. However, they did make one important discovery: her laundry.
The clothes appeared that they'd come just from the laundromat. They were folded neatly. They did not have the appearance that someone had went through the clothing or taken any of the items.
That seemed to rule out the abduction theory. If Niqui had been forcibly removed from the laundromat, why would her clothes be in the back of the SUV? Even more puzzling was this: who drove the vehicle from Richmond to Dayton, and why? Detectives canvassed the area and soon found that Niqui's ex-boyfriend lived in another part of the large apartment complex where the SUV was found.
We talked to the father of her child, and he was very cooperative. We checked his alibi. We found out he was at work at the time that she was reported missing. He agreed to take a lie detector test and come through it fine. So we could eliminate him as a suspect.
Another dead end. However, investigators discovered that Niqui did make a phone call to Dayton the day she disappeared.
Adrian. It's Niqui.
To a co-worker who lived about a mile from where the SUV was found.
Nail care products. Do you know where I can find them?
They talked about some specialty hair and nail products, and Niqui was told she could purchase the items at a store in Dayton.
This leads us to think that we've got two different scenarios. Something happened to her over here in Richmond, Indiana, or she drove over to Ohio and something happened to her over there.
There was also a third possible scenario. If Niqui did drive to Dayton that Sunday afternoon, perhaps something tragic happened on the way. But how did her SUV end up in the parking lot of her ex-boyfriend's apartment complex? Was it simply an unbelievable coincidence?
I find it hard to believe. And then if it's not coincidental, then what better way to throw the suspicion off of somebody over here in Richmond by taking the vehicle and putting it over where, say, her ex-boyfriend and the father of her child lives.
Your policy clearly states
that theory led detectives right back to Bobby Webster and his suspicious behavior following Niqui's disappearance. But Niqui's sister believes Bobby is innocent of any wrongdoing.
I love Bobby to death, and there's no way he'd do this. He'd have to be the devil himself to be able to walk around here and still see us face to face, you know? I mean, everybody has their limits.
Niqui's mother, however, isn't so sure about Bobby.
Have you seen Niqui?
There's a wise old woman once told me, keep your friends close and your enemies even closer. So I stuck with him like glue, because I figured if Bobby did do this, or if he knew anybody did do it, he would come to me.
Police continue to follow up on other possible suspects, while also keeping a close eye on Bobby Webster.
I believe that based on all the information we have so far, that if Mr. Webster did not have anything to do with the disappearance of Niqui McCown, he does know quite a bit about what did happen to her.
I don't know anything about Niqui's disappearance or whereabouts. I have nothing to do with it. I mean, I love Niqui more than I love myself. And all I wanted to do was just be the best man I could. And, you know, it feels unfair that I'm in the situation that I'm in now, just because I love so much, you know. I just don't understand it.
Meanwhile, a distraught family and a heartbroken young child wait and hope.
There's a little girl, 9 years old, who every night after she gets into bed says, Grandma, I said my prayers for Mommy. How much longer? Are we getting any closer? And I keep telling her every day is closer and closer. I just want somebody, somewhere, to come clean. Because there is somebody out there that knows something. Niqui didn't deserve this.
Niqui McCown's fate remains a mystery. Friends say she adored her daughter and would never run off by herself. Perhaps her fiancé had something to do with the disappearance. But what possible motive did he have? And what about Niqui's ex-boyfriend? He cooperated fully and passed a polygraph test. Could it have been a random act of violence? If that was the case, why was Niqui's vehicle found abandoned at the apartment complex in Dayton? Perplexing questions without any good answers. Niqui McCown is 5 feet 2 inches tall and weighs 115 pounds. She has brown eyes, brown hair, and a small scar over her left eye. Niqui was last seen on July 22, 2001 in Richmond, Indiana. Join me for the next fascinating edition of Unsolved Mysteries.